Good evening. Welcome to South Pacific Private's evening on understanding codependency. And while we're checking in, I'd like to acknowledge the Gayamagal people, part of the Eora Nation, as the traditional owners and custodians of the land upon which we work and recover. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Codependency for many years wasn't even a thing, and now it's a very big thing. And it's thanks to the work of Pia Melody from the Meadows in Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona, that we now accept codependency as a significant part of recovery from childhood trauma and addictions, and to some extent even PTSD and complex PTSD. When we're talking about codependency, we're talking about the dysfunctional, less than nurturing and perhaps abusive family systems that create children who become codependent adults. Now, it's an interesting thing. Pia Melody had been in recovery for quite a while herself and hit a really big wall in her life, was having a lot of rage attacks and struggling with her interpersonal relationships at work and at home. And she went into hospital, a treatment centre, not the Meadows, to see if she could get to the bottom of this. She was actually in recovery. I think she could have been around the 26-year clean and sober mark herself. So she was very aware of recovery and all the things we need to do to maintain it and be in it. And she found that when she would be starting to talk to these professionals about what she was going through, they were looking at her like she had two heads. Now, she's written many books, but the first one was Facing Codependency, and she outlines all of this in the beginning of the book, where she talks about feeling like she had nobody that could help her. She went, discharged herself from there, went back to work at the Meadows and started to talk to some of the professionals there, and was met with the same sort of blank looks. And she was talking about this sense of feeling not good enough, a sense of feeling she was, doing all these things to please people. And now we'd call it people pleasing. We didn't call it back then. We didn't call it that. And we would. Sorry, how long does the session go? Sorry, it's just jumped up, Dana. Probably about 30 minutes. It's provided I keep my eye on the time. She started to talk to some of the other clients at the Meadows that she was seeing that were coming in, had some knowledge about themselves but were struggling with their interpersonal relationships, with rage attacks. And it came from two parts. So what she discovered, and it was out of this work that she started to find that a lot of the therapists were starting to send people to her to have one-on-ones at the Meadows. And then she discovered that there were so many of them, she asked if she could run some workshops on it. And it was through this that she started to put together the model of developmental immaturity, which many of who've been in South Pacific will be familiar with. And this comes from the concept that if we are raised in a dysfunctional, less than nurturing family system, and that could be anything from total neglect and abandonment at one level, or too much concern, and what we call in Australia enmeshment, but what Americans call being parentified. Engulfment is a very good word to describe it. So we've got the two separate extremes, and we've got everything that runs in between it. Now, what we actually think between the overprotective parent, not making children face consequences of their own abuse or dysfunctional behaviour, and parents who actually are withdrawn and ignore and neglect and abandon a child. And that can be in any number of ways. Could be emotionally, could be physically, financially, socially, spiritually. And what she discovered was that there's five main areas that we need as children to develop into functional adults. And I'm going to quickly go through the five because there's actually quite a lot of material written on this now. So the first one is that we're of value in the family system. And we're in the value in the family system because we stand upright and breathe in and out, not because we get an A in maths or we get to be captain of the netball team or the cricket team, or because we keep our room tidy or we look after our younger siblings. We just are of inherent worth. Now when we're in a space where we're of inherent worth, we find that we are taught, inadvertently, the plus from that, the core issue that comes from that, is to be experience a sense of our own self-esteem, our own self-worth. So we are of inherent worth, and that whatever we're good at or we're not good at, so in terms of weaknesses and strengths, they speak to our humanity rather than defining us as worthless or better than. Now, if we're allowed to be, we acknowledge by a family system that we're of value, we learn healthy self-esteem. If we do not learn this, we actually fluctuate between less than and better than. And less than, of course, is it doesn't matter what I do, it's never going to be good enough. And better than is when it's actually been grandiose and arrogant. And that actually comes when children are brought into family systems where they learn that the way you get along in life is you prevail over others. So the example I often give people is that, you'll come home from school, maybe you're late primary, early teenage, and Dad says, did you get to be captain of the cricket team? And they go, no, I'm 13th man. What do you mean you're 13th man? I've been president of that club. Why aren't you da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da? And, Dad's on the phone to the coach, badgering the coach to put you in the team because he thinks you should be playing in the team. He actually thinks you should be captain, but he certainly thinks you should be in it. And the reality is you don't even like cricket. But you can't speak up because you know that it's never going to get anywhere because Dad comes from that better than position, like he's God of the family. He can do everything, inappropriate. The behaviour can be totally inappropriate, but he's God of the family. Now, what we want to do is get to the point where we can esteem ourselves from within, and that requires some work, as do all of these functional, coming to the functional adult area. But knowing whether that's one of your, whether the core value of self-esteem is something you struggle with, and there would be very few people I've worked with who sit in that space of coming from dysfunctional family systems or mentally unwell family systems or addicted family systems that have not struggled with their self-esteem. There's a whole lot of secondary and relational problems that come from that, and let me just quickly run through them because they're the same for all of these five issues, the values: depression, dishonesty, rage issues, enmeshment or parentifying, as I spoke about before, control issues, physical illnesses, intimacy issues, which often dovetails into sex and love addiction, eating disorders, money disorders, anxiety disorders, spirituality issues. It's like who's God and who am I listening to? Process addictions, which could be gaming or work or exercise. Chemical addictions, love and avoidance addictions, and problems with interdependence. Now, I would put sex addiction in that realm as well, but I think that really falls into that intimacy issues. All of those secondary and relational problems are generally why someone comes into South Pacific to do some work, and it comes from where we were raised and how we were raised and the messages we get from our parents. Now, for all of the people that I've worked with, they will sit in both less than and better than. And I just want to go through the other four because I want to come back and talk about this in a minute. I've got to remember to do that. Let's hope I cycle back around and do that. The second one is, are we allowed to be appropriately vulnerable? Now, when I'm talking about this as a child, I'm talking 0 to 18. That's 4 different ego states, 0 to 4, 5 to 8, 9 to 14, and 14 to 18. They're 4 different states. What you're capable of as a 15-year-old teenager is very different to what you're capable of as a 4-year-old. So you go through 4 different ego states. But in that period, the parenting that you've received will actually deeply impact how you show up in your adult life, and particularly in your intimate relationships with others. So when we're allowed to be appropriately vulnerable, and that's age appropriate, so what you're able to do and take a responsibility for as an 8-year-old is very different to an 18-year-old. But there are age appropriate vulnerabilities, and if we're not allowed to be age appropriate in our vulnerability, we will not learn boundaries. Now, boundaries are a thing that very few people were talking about when P and Melody started talking about this. Now everybody talks about boundaries like they've discovered them, which is great, and it has a lot to do with where do I begin and end, and where do you begin and end. And if I'm in a relationship with you, I'm putting into the relationship. You are putting into the relationship. We are creating the third energy, which is the relationship. The relationship is not the enmeshed, no movement, total control. That's not. We are individuals both committing to be in the relationship together. Now, boundaries, when Pia talks about this, she talks about an internal boundary, which is from your heart to your abdomen, invisible force field, protects your truth and protects you from coming out and offending others. So when someone says to you, like if someone says to me, oh Diane, you're a dreadful therapist, you know, the worst therapist I've ever dealt with, right? Yeah, I have a pretty solid internal boundary. So it would bounce. I wouldn't immediately be crushed by it. I might say to you, can you tell me more about why you say that? I'm curious, because I would be. I must tell you, it has never been said. I'm sure that it's possible, it might be. But, you know, it's like it bounces. I don't collapse because I have an internal boundary. Codependents are very worried about what everybody thinks of them. You know, what you think of me, as a codependent, unrecovered codependent person, what you think of me is more important than what I think of me. Dangerous territory for a codependent. So, you know, we need to have an internal boundary where I can check things out. Now, if someone says something nasty to me, there's 3 questions I ask. Is it true? You'll know straight away if it is. Is it not true? You'll know that straight away too. Is it questionable? If it's questionable, I then go and check it out with someone who I trust and whom I know. I don't just automatically take it as a given that your truth, your words to me are true when I'm not feeling like that's right. The second one is the external boundary, which prevents me from actually offending you or being in any way harsh to you or violent or anything like that. And of course, you know, we talk a lot about higher power, whatever that is for you, and it's whatever you choose it to be. Creative intelligence of the universe, could be religious if that's your gig, could be Buddha, could be, you know, nature, can be whatever you like. But most people I've worked with trauma, they don't go into their history without taking all available power with them. So when we're not allowed to be appropriately vulnerable, we don't learn boundaries, we will sit in a space where we're too vulnerable, which is when we generally don't have an internal boundary to protect us, or invulnerable, which means we have walls. When Pia talks about boundaries, she would often talk about having walls, no boundary at all, that is, I take on everything anyone says, or we might have fragmented boundaries. She calls them partial, I call them fragmented, same. And a fragmented boundary looks like this. I go to work, boss says, I want you to do this project and I want to pay you this and I want you to work extra and you navigate and negotiate with your boss what you can do and how much you can do it for and all of those things. So you have a voice. But then you go home to the family and you walk in the door, no hello, no nothing, and the partner or someone, let's say partner, says, there's no milk in the fridge. What? It's my fault, right? And I say, well, if I'm dysregulated and I'm not managing to have boundaries at home, got them okay at work, I'm likely to, that comment is likely to end up in World War III. And, you know, it'll be like, it's not my job, and I got the shopping on the weekend, you didn't do, and what are you doing? Anyway, I don't want to go to your mother's barbecue on Sunday anyway. You know what I mean? It's like we go from there to there. It becomes, we skew all the data, rather than the response, which might be something like, oh really? Do you want to go together and get some, or do we need some, or, you know, you might ask a question. Now, people who don't have internal boundaries totally understand what I'm talking about now. So we'll be too vulnerable, no internal boundary, or invulnerable walls. And you'll think you have boundaries if you have fragmented ones. I can do the boundaries at work, I can't do them at home. Interesting. What we want to do is get to a stage where we protect and contain ourselves. Now, we're always talking about the self first, because if you take care of yourself first, you will be able to take care of others. If you put your own oxygen mask on first, you can help others. You can't help others if you're gasping for breath. The third one is being perfectly imperfect, and often in South Pacific people will be walking around saying, I'm perfectly imperfect. If we're not allowed to be imperfect, and this will come from family systems where we have, we've always got to be the good child. We're not allowed to lose our temper. We're not allowed to speak up if we don't disagree with something. We're not allowed to ask questions about certain topics. So if we're not allowed to be imperfect, we don't learn to sit in reality. And reality is in 4 areas. Our body, what do I look like? How do I look after myself? How much do I value myself? My thinking, am I allowed to think my own thoughts, or do I have to just toe the party line of the family and just believe what everybody else does? My feelings, I have none, or I have explosive ones. Now this is the tell in this one, because often people who are not allowed to be imperfect will have significant rage issues. That's just one aspect of that. And behaviour, which is reflective of the 4 before. This, I believe, is when we're talking body, is where we have some, the disordered eating come in. Eating disorders are much more complex, but disordered eating will come in here. Thinking, we won't be able to, you know, think our own thoughts. The feelings, as I say, none. I'm numb in the feeling arena because I was never allowed to have any, or they're explosive. I'll, you know, truck along okay, and then and I can never understand what the is about. And the behaviour, it's what I do and what I don't do. And this is very interesting, because if we're not allowed to be imperfect, we don't learn how to sit in reality, we'll do 2 things. We'll be in bad rebellious, that is, we'll be acting out in some way, and it could be covertly, may not be that anybody else knows, or we'll be in good perfect. And that will be that we're hiding a lot of things. So I'm presenting this face to you here, but I'm actually behaving badly here. So we can flip-flop in that one too. And the very simple solution for this one is we accept that we are imperfect and so is everybody else. Now, that sounds really simple, but if you know anyone who sits in a space where they're struggling with perfectionism, they simply will not allow themselves to get anything wrong. So this can actually mean that people stay very stuck in things because they're not able to try anything new. They want to be expert at something they've never tried before. They're thinking they're on show all the time and everyone's watching them, which is not actually true, but that's what they think. I mean, most people are thinking about themselves, they're not thinking about you, just as saying. But they'll actually not be able to step into any maturity around, you know, intimate exchanges, or they'll get into blame all the time. It's a very big one, this one, even though it looks very simple, the imperfection. The next one is dependency. Now, this is an interesting one because dependency, we all have dependency needs as children. Remember, 0 to 18. And if we've got dependency needs and they're not being met, we will have serious trouble with self-care and we'll have serious inability to have interdependence with others. It's like we don't actually trust anybody. So there are 9 basic needs that we have as children. I always forget one. Let's see if I can get it right. Food, clothing, shelter. Spiritual nurturing, emotional nurturing, physical nurturing. There you are, there's 3 I've forgotten. Anyway, there's 9 basic needs. Someone will be able to tell me what they are, I'm sure. Food, clothing, shelter, physical nurturing, emotional nurturing, spiritual nurturing, education, dental and medical. There you go, that's 9. Now, if as a child you didn't get any of those looked after, or some of them didn't get looked after, you're going to have a very interesting relationship with dependency needs. I often say to clients, tell me what it is, what the difference between a need and a want is. So what's the difference between a need and a want? And they won't be able to tell me. And we often get our needs and wants confused. So it'll be, I need to be fed, I need to have dinner on the table at a certain time. That's a want, that's not a need. Maybe I need to look after myself and have a day where I just do some self-reflection and I do some self-care, whatever that is. Might be going for a surf, could be reading a book, could be anything. But needs and wants, when we get muddled up with the needs and wants, we don't know what our needs are. We get them confused with our wants. And it will be a very interesting dynamic because we'll sit in a place where we don't get any of our needs met, and then we get resentful because they're not met. But the point is we don't know what they are, so we're not even asking for them. So it's all skewed. We will sit in a place as a result of that being too dependent. That is what I think of me. What I want you to tell me that I'm okay. And if you tell me I'm okay, then I'm okay. It's like I don't even know. Or we become anti-dependent. That is needless and wantless. And when we're in that space of being needless and wantless, we get nothing. It's very interesting. To be functional around this, we need to be aware of our needs and we need to appropriately meet them. Ourself first and then others. Always yourself first. And I do not mean selfishly. I do not mean that you ride roughshod over anyone and look after your own needs and not take care of other people. One of the interesting things about needs and wants is I would get them confused before I came into recovery. So it'd look like this. I might do a big day at work and then I come home and what I really want is I want a cup of tea and I want a hug and I want someone to listen to me for 10 minutes, download about how hard the day was. But I don't ask for any of that. I get my needs and wants confused. What I do is I come home, hi, yeah, how was your day? Yeah, good, and I keep moving until I get to the home office, and then I log on to the home office and guess what I do? I buy a new pair of shoes. That'll make me feel better. And then when they come online, online, I'm click, yeah, buy now, and then I feel, that'll make me better. The shoes will come a day or two later, however long it takes, and I'll wear them once and that'll be the end of that. If I continue to do that in my relationship, and I'm not asking my partner to support me in whatever it is I need, but, the first 15 or 20 minutes I get home or something, what I'm going to do in about 2 or 3 months' time, or maybe 2 or 3 years, depending on what you like and how much you suppress what you need, I'm going to actually say, you never do anything for me. And I'm going to blame them for why I'm not feeling like I'm nurtured in the relationship. Do you see what I mean? So needs and wants are you've got to be really careful with this because you'll get them skewed and then you'll blame someone else because they're not getting looked after. So get very clear about what your needs are and what your wants are. Totally different things. We need to be looked after and look after self-care. We need to be able to take responsibility for ourselves and ask for what we want. Okay, the last one is spontaneous and open. When we are children, we are spontaneous and open. We jump on beds, we spill milk, we lose jumpers, we lose bags, we do all sorts of stuff. We're in the moment, particularly if we're allowed to be and we're not in a terribly dysfunctional family where we're shut down all the time. If we're allowed to be spontaneous and open and joyful, you know, kids, you see them play, they're kicking around and they're laughing, and you know, it's in the moment stuff. We lose that as adults, I think, a lot of the time. When we're allowed to be spontaneous and open, what we learn is moderation. Now, this is where we have the concept of, I call it limit setting with boundaries, or personal containment with boundaries. So we're not too contained, and we're not let do whatever we want. Kids will push against it. You know, they'll tell you they don't need limits. They don't need to hear the no. But in fact they do. Because in setting limits, you know, this is the time to play, this is the time to do the homework, this is the time to have a swim, this is the time to go to bed. There's limit setting, and in doing that in a functional family system, children feel safe. They trust the rhythm of the family system. They trust that dinner's going to be served. They trust that, you know, mum and dad are going to come home. They trust all sorts of stuff. That Saturday we do sport, or, you know. And if we don't learn moderation, what happens to us as adults is we go out of control or controlling. It's the extreme. And if we are out of control, it's because we've had no limit, and we're controlling. It's because we're trying to wrestle some sort of safety from the part of us that never felt safe as children. We need to be able to respond to our environment in a functional way. What we want to do as functional adults is be able to be spontaneous, open and moderate at the same time. So the functional adult comes out of doing the work on our history. If we were raised in less than nurturing situations, which many of us were, and let me say that as a general rule, my experience of working with clients and my own experience personally is as dysfunctional and out of control as some parents can be. As a general rule, I could count on one hand the amount of parents I know, the clients that I work with, that meant to harm the child. They had such serious mental illness they meant to harm the child. As a general rule, most people don't they're not deliberately trying to harm their child. We're talking now about, and I'm going to bring this to a close in a moment because I'm conscious of time. We're talking about intergenerational trauma. If you look back at your history and you know a little about your history, you look at how your grandparents were raised. You may have had stories from your mum and dad. If you haven't heard them, ask them. What was it like when you were a kid? How were you raised when you were a kid? Grandparents raised parents a certain way. Parents, not knowing now, in our time, we can get help. We can talk about this. This is everyday talking these days. Parents, perhaps my generation of parents anyway, there was no help available for them. For me, I have help available. Hopefully I don't transfer too much of it onto my child. And if there's any sense that I have in my discussions with her, she will go and get help for it. You know, she will go and see a therapist. She will talk about things that are troubling her in a more transparent and open way than what my parents would have been up to, because I am talking about it. Now, it's not the everyday discussion over the dinner table, that's for sure. And I mean, she's an adult now, so she's often running her own race and a parent herself. But what I'm saying is that intergenerationally, they're not trying to harm us. They are simply doing the best they can. Now, I've got to tell you, there was a large part of my life where I actually thought to myself, I will never be able to say that about my parents. I will never say of my mother, she did the best she could. Well, now I can say it. And you know why? Because I've done enough work on my history to know that she didn't do any of that. She was a chronic alcoholic, never got sober, never went to AA, never did anything. So she was kind of a train wreck from the time, my earliest memory to when she died. What I do know is that if she'd had any sort of sense of awareness, she would not have done to me what she did. All good. What I also know is that at some level, and I want to say this to you, if you're thinking about doing a bit of recovery work, thinking about coming into South Pacific to actually look at your history, childhood trauma, any sort of addictions, PTSD, then what I want to say to you is this. I actually believe, and I often used to say this to clients, if I look at my history back there, can't change a day of it. Cannot change a day of it. Can wish for 1,000 years it was different. It's not. Never going to be different. But by me actually turning around, and this is what we do in recovery, we turn around at various points with support, not on our own, and we look at what happened. What happened to me? How do I feel about what happened to me? And then what I do, as I do with professional help, is I turn away from it. It doesn't change what's going on back there. It's set in concrete. It's never going to change. But it's like I put my arms up like this, and I say, I will do my work now so that that does not go on to the next generation. Now that's powerful. That's really powerful. So if you think that you could actually, and I know I've seen a lot of clients come into South Pacific, you know what they do? First thing they'll say, I'm here because of my children. Because I suddenly realised that I was going to do to my children some of what was done to me, and I don't want that to happen. That's a powerful motivator. You know, you think when you're going to have kids, you think, oh, I love this child. You have no idea how the feeling's going to be and what you will do to protect the child. And a lot of people come into recovery for that. Now, just in finishing, I want to say this. I want to say a couple of things. Codependent people often mistake things because they don't know. So they mistake intensity for intimacy. Let me say it again. They mistake intensity in their relationships for intimacy. And what they really need is self-love. The second thing they do, they think if they're in a relationship and it's obsessive, you know, there's a lot of obsession going on. That could be in the form of coercive control and all sorts of stuff. They mistake that for care. And what they need is self-care. You see how self's always there? And the third thing they do is they mistake control for security. And what they really need is healthy self-esteem. So if you're living with intensity, obsession or control, and you're mistaking them for intimacy, care and security, what you really need is self-love, self-care and self-esteem. And if you do the work for yourself because some part of you believes you're worth it, or you think your children think you're worth it, or whatever it is, then you can step out of the dysfunction of your history and into freedom today. It won't be a short journey, let me tell you, but it will be absolutely worth it. So, being emotionally regulated doesn't mean problems disappear, or that you don't get afraid, or that things don't get tough. It means you can regulate from within whatever comes up without trying to escape your body, and you can do it with compassion and responsibility. And responsibility is just an ability to respond. So you've created a home within yourself that's safe, and that fundamentally is self-love. So I want to thank you for being with us tonight. I've thrown a lot at you. A couple of things I want to just remind you of. You can reach out to South Pacific if you need support. Pia Melody's book, Facing Codependency, it's where it all started, what it is, where it comes from and how it sabotages our life. It's not a massive book. You probably even get it online these days. I just like the book now. I like the, so have a look, have a read. You just don't know how much you might walk into freedom. And just before I finish, I just want to quickly look at some of the comments. Okay. Yes, you can be less than and better than, flipping, flopping, and that's what I wanted to say. Thanks, Debbie. So when I talk about less than, better than, too vulnerable, invulnerable, bad, rebellious, good, perfect, too dependent, anti-dependent, out of control, controlling, I think we flip-flop, because I think what happens to us as children, we go into that less than space, and then as adults, and that's painful. And so what we do is we zip up our emotions, don't feel anything, and start to live from our head, which is when we're in our better than. So I think we do flip-flop. Okay, Judith, we've given you some information about reaching out to South Pacific. Thanks, Hines. I'm glad that it was helpful. Thanks, B. That's very nice of you to log on. Lisa, great. Thank you. Emma, very good to hear from you. And Lynette, wow, from way up north. That's great. Raquel, breaking the chain. We are breaking the chain so we don't pass on our dysfunction to the people that come after us, which means by the time you're at my stage of life and you're dealing with the grandkids, it's nowhere near as dysfunctional as when I was dealing with my mother. So there you go. Esther, thank you. Roger, oh, good to hear from you, Roger. Susan, yes, you can replay it. It will be up on South Pacific YouTube channel. I'm looking at the IT person sitting next to me. Tomorrow, maybe? Close. Anyway, it'll be up. And I think that's a great thing to do. So, great. Frank, yes, good, thank you. Very informative. Good, thank you, Sharon. Brenda, Kaz, and Denise. Can't you break it after decades? Yes, I think you mean can you? Well, yes, absolutely you can. And as I said, it's not a quick fix. You know, there's got to be a commitment. But if you have good running mates with you, you may be in 12-step program, maybe not, you've got good therapy, you've got some good recovery people around you and people who support you, you can actually get through it. I'm absolutely convinced of that. I've seen miracles happen, miracles with people. In fact, I saw somebody recently that I thought who was a constant, he'd admitted to South Pacific on a number of occasions, and I thought this poor soul's never going to actually get well. It's going to be his life. I ran into him the other day, completely different person, in recovery, functional, 4 years, clean and sober, amazing. So, you know, anything can happen, and generally does. So, thanks for being with us tonight. Appreciate it, and look forward to being of service in the future with you. And if you need help, please reach out to South Pacific. The 1-800 number's up there, and this will be replayed, as are all the Facebook Lives on the South Pacific YouTube channel, maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day. It just depends how busy they are. Thank you very much. Bye. Have a good evening.